The morning light came through the kitchen window the way it always had, slow and golden, sliding across the countertop my wife picked out 32 years ago. I remember she stood in the showroom for 40 minutes deciding between the ivory and the cream. I told her they looked identical. She told me I had no eye for beauty. She was right about most things. I poured my coffee and sat at the table alone, the way I had every morning for the past 4 years since she passed. The house had a particular kind of quiet to it now, not empty, exactly, but settled, like it had made its peace with holding just one person. I had made my peace with it too, or so I thought. My name is Arthur. I am 71 years old. I spent 34 years as a structural engineer, long enough to understand that the things most likely to collapse are the ones where the damage starts from the inside. I should have understood that earlier than I did. My daughter and I had always been close, or I believed we had. After her mother died, she came by twice a week. She brought food I didn't need and had conversations I did. Her husband, my son-in-law, was a quiet man who smiled at the right moments and said very little in between. I never disliked him. I never fully trusted him either, but I told myself that was just the instinct of a father who thought no one was quite good enough. Most fathers feel that way. Most fathers are wrong. Their daughter, my granddaughter, was a different story entirely. She had her grandmother's eyes and her grandmother's habit of saying exactly what she thought, with no apology for the timing. She called me every Sunday without fail. She sent me articles about things she thought I would find interesting. When she was accepted into nursing school 2 years ago, she called me before she called anyone else. I cried. I told her not to tell anyone I cried. She told me she already had her phone recording. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Last spring, she got engaged. I heard about it the right way, she called me, voice shaking with happiness, telling me his name was Daniel and that he was kind and patient, and had already asked her what my favorite food was because he wanted to cook it at the first family dinner. I told her my favorite food was anything made with genuine intention. She told me that was a very old man thing to say. I agreed completely. The wedding was planned for June, a Saturday. She told me she wanted me to walk her down the aisle alongside her father. I said I wouldn't miss it for anything in this world. I meant it. 4 days before the wedding, my daughter called me. Her voice was careful in that particular way that told me the words had been rehearsed. She said the venue had a strict capacity limit. She said the seating had become complicated. She said, and here she paused just long enough that I felt the shape of what was coming. She said it might be better if I watched the live stream from home. I held the phone and looked out the window at the oak tree in my backyard that I planted when my daughter was 7 years old. It was taller than the house now. I asked her if she was telling me I was not invited to my granddaughter's wedding. She said it wasn't like that. She said I would be there in spirit. She said my granddaughter understood. She said the live stream would be beautiful. I told her I needed to go, and that I would call her back. I didn't call her back. I sat in that kitchen for a long time. I am not a man who cries easily, but I am honest enough to say that I came close that afternoon. Not from hurt, exactly though it was that too, but from a kind of confusion that felt almost physical, like trying to stand on ground that had shifted without warning. I called my granddaughter that evening. She picked up on the second ring. The silence on her end, when I explained what her mother had told me, was the kind of silence that contains something very large. Then she said, quietly, that she hadn't been told I wasn't coming. She said she had assumed I would be there. She said she had saved a seat. She asked me to give her 24 hours. She called back in 6. What she told me in that call rearranged everything I thought I understood about the last 2 years of my life. 18 months earlier, my daughter had come to me during what felt like an ordinary visit. She brought a casserole. We talked about the weather and about a television program we both watched. Near the end of the evening, she mentioned that a financial advisor she trusted had suggested that older individuals living alone sometimes benefited from having a trusted family member hold a power of attorney, purely as a precaution, she said. For emergencies. For ease. She had the paperwork already drawn up. I was not a careless man. I knew what a power of attorney meant. But I was 69 and she was my daughter, and her mother had just been gone a year and 14 months, and I suppose I was still finding my footing. I signed it. I told myself it was practical. I told myself it was trust. What it was, as I would come to understand, was a door I had opened from the inside. Over the following months, my daughter had made herself the primary contact on 3 of my accounts. She had spoken with my bank and explained that I was sometimes confused and that the family was keeping a close eye on things. She had, on 2 occasions, transferred money from my savings into a joint account that existed only in her name and her husband's. The total, when my granddaughter had quietly looked at the statements she found in a filing cabinet at her parents' house during a visit, was $43,000. She had also, my granddaughter told me, called the wedding venue personally and reduced the guest count by removing my name from the list, telling them I was in poor health and unable to travel. The venue was 20 minutes from my house. I sat with all of this the way you sit with something that changes the shape of things you thought were fixed. Then I stood up. The next morning, I drove to the law office of a man I had worked alongside 30 years ago on a commercial building project. He was retired from contracting, but his son-in-law was an elder law attorney, and he made a call on my behalf before 9 in the morning. I had an appointment by 10. The attorney's name was Leonard. He was direct and thorough, and he did not waste words, which I appreciated. He told me that what my daughter had done with my accounts was not a misunderstanding. It was financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, which carried specific legal weight in our state. He told me that the power of attorney could be revoked immediately and in writing. He told me we should contact the bank that same afternoon. We did. I also called my granddaughter. I told her I was handling things and that she should have her wedding exactly as she intended. I told her I would be there to walk her down the aisle if she still wanted me. She said that was never in question. I want to tell you what it felt like to walk into that ceremony on a Saturday afternoon in June with my granddaughter's arm in mine. The light was coming through the tall windows of the reception hall the way light does when it has nowhere else to be. Daniel was standing at the end of the aisle looking at her the way a man looks at the one thing in the room that matters. My granddaughter squeezed my arm just before we started walking, and she said, quietly enough that only I could hear, "I knew you'd be here." I told her there was nowhere else I would be. My daughter and my son-in-law were already seated when I arrived. My daughter's face, when she saw me enter that room, was a document I could have read for a long time. My son-in-law stared at the floor. I nodded at them both and gave my attention back to where it belonged to my granddaughter, to the ceremony, to the reason we were all there. I did not speak to my daughter at the reception. She tried to speak to me. She touched my arm near the cake table and said she could explain everything if I would just give her the chance. Her voice had that rehearsed quality again. I told her, calmly and without performance, that I had already spoken with an attorney and that she would be hearing from him directly. I told her I hoped she enjoyed the reception. Then I went back to the dance floor where my granddaughter was laughing at something Daniel had said, and I stayed there. In the weeks that followed, Leonard moved methodically. The power of attorney was revoked and filed. My bank accounts were returned to my sole control. A formal complaint was filed with the State Adult Protective Services. The transferred funds, the $43,000, were the subject of a civil demand letter that Leonard sent to my daughter's address on a Thursday morning. She called me that afternoon. She was not using the careful, rehearsed voice anymore. She told me this was a family matter and that I was making it ugly. She told me she had done everything out of love. She told me I was hurting her daughter, my granddaughter, by doing this. I listened to all of it without interrupting, because I wanted to hear what she had prepared, and because I have learned that silence is often more effective than argument. When she finished, I told her that love does not transfer $43,000 without permission. I told her that concern for a parent does not involve telling a bank that the parent is confused when the parent is not confused. I told her I would see her in whatever legal forum Leonard determined was appropriate. I hung up. My son-in-law appeared at my door 2 days later, without calling first. He stood on the porch in the late afternoon, looking diminished in a way that was almost difficult to witness. He said they had made mistakes. He said things had gotten out of hand financially. They had debts, he said, that I didn't know about. He said my daughter had convinced herself it was just borrowing. I told him borrowing requires asking. I told him I wished him well, and that the matter was now in the hands of people better suited to resolve it than either of us. I told him he should speak to a lawyer of his own. He left without another word. The civil case settled 4 months later. My daughter and my son-in-law repaid the $43,000 in full, plus Leonard's fees, plus an additional amount for what the state statutes describe as damages in cases of financial exploitation. The Adult Protective Services investigation remained open for several months and resulted in a formal finding that was placed on record. It was not a criminal conviction. I want to be accurate about that. But it was documented, and documentation has a weight of its own. I am not going to tell you that I felt triumphant. Triumph is for things you wanted to win. I never wanted to be in a position to win this. What I felt, mostly, was tired. And then, gradually, something quieter than tired. Something closer to clear. I have thought a great deal about the moment I signed that power of attorney. I am an engineer. I understand load-bearing systems. I understand that what holds a structure together is not the grand architectural gesture, but the integrity of each individual joint. I trusted a joint I should have inspected, and the cost of that was real. So I want to tell you what I did in the months that followed, not because I think my choices are the only right ones, but because the people I care about deserve practical things, not just stories. I met with Leonard and had my will, my healthcare directive, and my remaining financial documents reviewed in full. Every account now has a clear paper trail. I designated a neutral third party, a trust officer at my bank, for any financial decisions that might arise if I am ever genuinely unable to make them. There is no single family member with unchecked access to anything. I also changed my phone habits. I talk to my granddaughter every Sunday. She is in her second year of nursing school and she is extraordinary at it, which surprises no one who knows her. I talk to my daughter occasionally. The conversations are short and careful, and I keep them that way. She has not apologized in words that I recognize as a real apology. I have accepted that I may be waiting a long time. I have also accepted that I can hold both things at once. I can grieve the relationship I thought we had while also refusing to pretend the damage wasn't real. Some people have asked me whether I feel lonely. I feel many things. Loneliness is one of them. Some mornings, when the light comes through the kitchen window and the house is very quiet. But quiet is not the same as empty, and I know the difference now. Last month, my granddaughter and Daniel drove 3 hours to have dinner at my house. She brought ingredients and cooked her grandmother's pot roast from a recipe she had found in an index card box in my pantry. She did not tell me she was looking for it. She just found it and learned it and showed up with a bag of groceries and the particular determination her grandmother used to have in a kitchen. We ate at the table where I drink my coffee every morning. We talked until past 10 o'clock. When they left, she hugged me for a long time at the door and said she would see me at Christmas. I stood on the porch and watched their taillights disappear down the street. The oak tree in the backyard was just visible from where I stood, tall and steady against the evening sky. I planted it when my daughter was 7 years old. It is taller than the house now. It will outlast most of what I have built and lost and rebuilt in my time here. I went inside and washed the dishes and turned off the lights. I slept well that night, which is not something I could always say this past year. But there is a particular rest that comes when you have done the honest thing and the difficult thing and the right thing, and when you know clearly, without question, who in your life chooses to show up and who does not. I know that now. That is worth something. That is worth quite a lot. If you are watching this, and something in this story feels familiar, if you have signed something you did not fully examine, or trusted someone with access they have not fully honored, please do not wait as long as I did. Talk to an attorney. Review your accounts. Know what your documents say and who they give authority to. Not because your family will certainly betray you, but because loving someone and protecting yourself are not opposites. A strong foundation does not assume the structure will hold. It checks. Take care of yourself. No one else is required to.